finally happening. We're finally going to figure out how much water is in our cisterns without having to walk all the way up the hill and take the lid off. The only thing is, this was a lot more confusing and complicated than we thought. So we were just gonna put a monitor on there and be done with it. And in our research, we found just about every kind of monitor you can fathom. So we thought, maybe we should unbox a few and try a few to figure out which one we really like. This stuff is so confusing that I had to make a spreadsheet. So this stuff is clear as mud. Before we jump into taking a look at each of these products, I just want to say that there's really no way to accurately compare these products because while they have a similar function, they're just all wildly different. And we're only gonna look at 5 today, but there's gotta be 50 or maybe 500 of these things out there. What I've tried to do is distill down each of the features that I feel like people watching this video would care about, or that would be probably a factor for a buying decision or not. But there's just no way we could possibly cover all the little details about each of these. So we're gonna look at those things. You're probably still gonna have to do a lot of your own research. So this one is the, it's a no brand monitor. Apparently it's so cheap that branding just wasn't in the budget. And the box is pre-crunched. That's just a bonus. They don't charge you for that. This guy comes in at a whopping $62. So this monitor is a real simple, basic, ultrasonic, wireless monitor. So the sensor, this little guy, is ultrasonic, so there's no contact with whatever it is that you're monitoring. In our case, it's going to be water, but it could be pretty much any non-flammable liquid. So heating oil would be an example. And the display here is a wireless system, so you don't need to run any cables or anything. It looks like it'll sit on a desk. It's like it's battery powered. So the only option on this display is to use batteries. The sensor is also battery powered. There's a small door in the back. So I think a couple of factors that will be big decision points for most of us are going to be the range of the system and then whether it's a contact or non-contact system. So we already talked about this being a non-contact wireless system, ultrasonic sensor. The range, according to the box, is 300 feet or 100 meters, and that's line of sight. So if you start adding walls or obstructions to that, it's going to change. But there's also a lot of other features that we should look at with each sensor. So let's kind of go through those with this sensor and talk about each one that might be a decision point. Let's talk about the sensor first. I think maintenance and upkeep are a definite question for these types of things because for most of us, they're going to be installed for quite a long time. So as you saw, I put AAA batteries in this sensor. Obviously, you could use a rechargeable battery, but you can see that this sensor has no provision for long-term self-charging, which means maintenance. I'm not exactly sure, obviously, how long the batteries will last. The box says up to 12 months. And I think that depends a lot on how much the fluid level changes, because that affects how often the sensor sends a reading, and every time it sends a reading, obviously it takes some juice. This one, you're going to have to change the batteries in, and therefore, if you're out of town or you're away from your property quite a bit or whatever, this one could die and you wouldn't know. These sensors are not compatible with a curved tank. They have to have a flat surface to bear against. Now, if you have a curved tank that has like right in the middle of the top, like a dome or something, you could mount this there. But if your tank is bulbous or curved or a weird shape or something, you cannot mount this at any kind of an angle to the tank. Another question that you might want to be answering is how many tanks can you monitor? So if you're doing rainwater harvesting, for example, and you're using smaller containers like a 55-gallon barrel, you may have 8 of them. This system is not expandable. It's one sensor and one display. If you're the kind of person who wants to not just have a display that you can see the status of your tanks, but maybe you're out visually inspecting your tanks and you want to see where they're at the tank, this sensor does not have a display at the tank where you can see the tank levels. A couple of things to note about this sensor: it's compatible according to the instructions with common tank shapes. So most of us are going to have round or like octagonal or whatever shapes, but there are tanks out there with a curved bottom, for example. This sensor says it's compatible with all of those, so we have to take it at its word. The other question is material. This sensor is compatible with metal tanks and concrete and plastic and cement. The only caveat to that is the sensor cannot be placed near the side of the tank, because the ultrasonic signal will bounce off of the wall and give a false reading. So it doesn't matter what the tank is made out of so much, but it's more about where the sensor is located and ultimately the distance between the sensor and the liquid. This sensor has a range of 0 feet to the liquid up to 45 feet to the bottom of the reading. Pretty versatile. So if you have a tank that's anywhere from 0 to 45 feet deep, this sensor can read that. So that's kind of how the sensor on this setup works. Now let's talk about the display and what kind of information it provides. There are really only a couple of ways that these monitoring systems display the tank volume. This one happens to show the height of the liquid in the tank. So you would need to know what that corresponds to in volume if you were trying to track the volume. But this one does give you a 10-bar scale, and you set that up in the setup menu. You tell it where the top of the liquid is when it would be full and where the bottom of the liquid would be when it's empty, and it'll tell you in a 10-bar scale approximately where the water level is. To say that more clearly, you're not going to know how many gallons or how many liters are in your tanks using this system. It's only telling you the height of the liquid. Some of these systems provide you with different temperatures. This particular unit has a temperature sensor at the display, and then also has a temperature sensor at the water sensor, and it shows both of those on the display. Depending on how sophisticated you want to get with your water management, a history or a memory feature might be something you're looking for. This features a minimum and a maximum only memory. So we can see where the minimum level was, the maximum level, and then we can turn that feature off. It doesn't say on the box what those readings are, how long they stay. It just gives you a minimum and a maximum. You can set up in this system a high level and a low level alarm. So if the system were to get too full, an alarm would go off, or if it gets too low, an alarm would go off. This one does not have any feature for detecting a leak. So if a rapid change happens, it's not going to notify you. Also, the display is not particularly programmable. It's kind of a what you see is what you get. The buttons are pretty clear. They're a little clunky, and kind of looking at the manual, I think once you kind of got used to this system, the day-to-day operation would be pretty straightforward. The setup, on the other hand, might be a little bit more time-consuming. And as you can see, this system is fairly primitive. You're not going to be able to program it to control, say, a pump or anything like that. It's really just a bare bones monitor. I did forget to mention that it's able to display the water volume or liquid volume in feet or in meters, and the temperature in Fahrenheit or Celsius. We're going to try to just do a quick setup on this thing. We should be able to set it up so that we can adjust the meter and see kind of changes, because it doesn't know this isn't a liquid. It's just looking for a change, I think. So it probably took about 10 minutes to go through this and get the tank depth set, which is totally simulated because I'm using this over the kitchen table. We also set the dimension into feet. We set the temperature to Fahrenheit. Getting the sensor to pair to the display, I'm not really sure what I did. Like, I took the batteries in and out a couple times, but we've got a reading now. And from what I understand, I think this transmits a signal every 30 seconds if the tank level changes. If it doesn't change, it sends a signal every 3 minutes. It does that to conserve battery. So right now, this is saying that we have 70% of our tank. I don't believe that's true because I set the tank depth to 6 feet. And it looks to me like this is about 1 foot. So this hasn't updated. I am seeing the signal on the display right here where it says it's receiving the signal. Maybe if we listen carefully, we can actually hear the ultrasonic. Let's listen for the ultrasonic. It's too quiet. I set an alarm for the high and low level, I think for 2 feet. And it looks to me like that now says 60% of our tank capacity. I haven't seen a reading here in the last few seconds. I'm kind of hoping by wiggling around and moving a bunch, we'll get lots of updates. So I set that and it lost the connection, and now it's looking for the connection again. So I just heard the ultrasonic. And there we go. So it did send a signal. So now it says we're at 80%. So right now it thinks we're at 4.95 feet. Doesn't look like 5 feet to me. So I'm just going to move up a little bit here and hopefully we'll see. So now it's down to, oh no, it's still 80%. And it only sends a signal if it perceives that the depth has changed. It still thinks it's 4.95 feet. I don't know if this thing actually checks every 30 seconds or not. All right. I guess we're done. So I'm not going to wait all day for this thing to get a reading. Does it work? Yes. Is it accurate? I don't know yet. I guess you'd have to drill a hole or use an existing hole in your tank to mount it. Basically, there's just a couple mounting screws. So mounting the sensor doesn't seem like it would be particularly difficult. They do include a sight bubble. It's really important for an accurate measurement that the sensor be straight up and down. So I would say this thing probably half an hour to put it together. The whole updating thing, I guess it's not gonna update often, which you wouldn't really need it to do, day to day unless you were monitoring something quickly. But overall, I would say it works. One last detail, no, you can't check this via the internet. It's just not that sophisticated. I would say this is a simple, affordable, no frills tank monitor. The performance has yet to be determined, but for 62 bucks, not bad. Next is a little bit more expensive product. This one comes in at $150 to $155. And ironically, I think it may have less features, but let's take a look. First of all, this is made by a company called Teckelek. There actually is a brand name on it. They had marketing budget for that. The range on this guy is at 750 feet, so a little over double what the previous sensor was. And again, this one is a non-contact, it's an ultrasonic sensor, so there's nothing in the fluid or the liquid. All of these, of course, are outdoor rated. But this one actually has kind of a, what's wetsuits made out of? Neoprene, that's the one. It has a neoprene gasket included. So that's gonna be a much tighter seal on the tank, which especially if you're gonna use this to measure oil, you wanna keep water from rain and such out of your tank. Like the previous sensor, you can see that this sensor has a flat mount, and because it's ultrasonic, it's not really compatible with a curved tank. They do include a nice adapter that looks like it's pre-threaded for some of the most common tank threads. It looks like there might be some modification or something necessary to make this thing work. But you're gonna get a much better mount with this included, I don't even know what it's called. We'll call it a bung. I don't know. This unit actually has a seal on it, and it says that the warranty is void if you open the seal. So from what I understand, it actually contains like a watch battery, a CR250 battery. So I'm guessing that's included. I'm not sure what the lifespan is on that. I don't have the documentation, but I'm gonna guess probably 6 months to a year, which is confusing because if you open it and the warranty is void, That doesn't make any sense. I saw somewhere, here we go, up to 10-year battery life. Well, my kids will be 10 years old by then, and they can go check the cistern levels. Obviously, with a sealed battery, charging's not an option, so I guess at 10 years, you can either pull the sticker and replace the battery and lose your warranty, or you can throw it away and buy a new sensor. This company, we're actually gonna look at another sensor that's made by the same company, and they're very similar. There's actually a small notch or a knockout that you can see in this sensor. That's actually a feature they include on some of their sensors where you can see the tank depth at the tank. This particular model does not include that display, so that's left out. This system cannot be expanded. It's a one sensor, one receiver system, and the range on this sensor is from 0 to 12 feet or 0 to 4 meters depth. There's really nothing to this display. First of all, it's powered by wall power. There's no batteries. So if the power's out, you're not going to be able to read your tank volume. The display is in the height of the liquid. Again, there's no indication of liters or gallons. What we'll see is 10 bars over here, and that'll show us what the level of the liquid is. You can tell by looking at this, there's no history, there's no tracking or anything included with it. It is a real-time display. It does have a low level alarm on it. You cannot set the alarm. It's just programmed to a percentage. I believe it's 20% of tank volume. This little red light will come on, which is the only alarm. It doesn't detect any leaks or changes, rapid changes in volume or anything like that. It's very bare bones. We're not even gonna try to program this thing to test it. I can tell you that the programming's not complicated, but it's definitely sophisticated. There's a series of little switches that are in the back of the display, and then once you set that, you have to put the two together and get them to talk to each other for a minute, and then you kind of plug it in, and then you wait an hour. So it cannot control a pump or any kind of third-party system. It's not expandable, and no, you're not going to be able to check the water level on the internet or your phone. This one is kind of a big brother, even though it's an older model number to the one we just looked at. It's made by the same company, and the sensor is very similar, but it's kind of has some unique differences. So let's take a look. Well, it's a nice high quality display, or at least it feels quality. This one actually looks like it's got some more features. This system is only about $20 more than the one we just looked at, which we would say is probably very, very, very primitive. I mean, it had nothing really, just monitors the liquid level. So this one will come in at $189. So kind of weird, the previous sensor that we just looked at is actually the same sensor like part number. And what's confusing is the internet, I found this previous one that we just looked at was rated at 750 feet of range. But when I looked at the manual, it actually says 490 feet. So that's a big difference. That's 260 feet. This sensor is the same part number, and it's included with a completely different system. The range on this sensor is in the manual at 495 feet, which is kind of what tipped me off to the other sensor not being the same range. But this is one big difference. Behind here is a small LCD display that actually gives us the tank level at the tank. Otherwise, it looks like it's basically the same non-contact ultrasonic sensor. It's got a neoprene gasket. One thing I do see that is slightly different is that there's a small red LED up here, and I'm guessing that's a low level indicator. The other one, of course, didn't have that. Otherwise, it looks like it's about the same. It's got the same sealed battery inside. It's a CR2450 battery. and they're saying up to 10 years of life. Just like the previous sensor, it's not compatible with a curved tank, so that's not an option. Even though this system appears to be more complicated, it is also not expandable from what I can tell. Although ironically, you can buy just the sensor from this company. So if this system isn't expandable, maybe they do have one that is expandable. The range of this sensor is from 1.6 feet to 9.8 feet, or roughly 0.5 meter to 3 meters. So even though it's similar to the previous sensor, it's got a different range. The display on this system is way more sophisticated. In fact, it's kind of up there with some of the higher end systems. It gives you not only a reading in the amount in the tank, but it's able to convert that into gallons or liters. The caveat there is that the setup is going to be quite a bit more sophisticated. And if you have underground tanks, for example, like we do, and you don't really know what the tanks are, you really can't use a system like this because you're going to need to know the dimensions of the tank. That's how it's calculating the usage. But a huge bonus to this setup is that it has a massive memory, up to 1 year of system usage. It can show you daily, weekly, every 30 days, or even every 365 days. So this is a great way to keep track of usage. I would expect to find this feature on a very high-end system, but not on something that's sub $200. It looks like the power source for this display is just a simple 5-volt USB, but there actually is a backup battery in the display because there's so many parameters that need to be programmed that you wouldn't want to lose those if the power were to go out. They do include this USB adapter, and I think because this company is actually from Ireland, they've kind of taken into account that people from all over the world are going to buy their product. So they include this kind of multi-adapter thing that you plug the USB into, and I think they know because we're in America, they've included the beloved 110-volt adapter. But if you're in Europe or something like that, you could obviously get this product to suit your needs. And there's some wisdom kind of in using this type of system. The nice thing is we can actually plug it into a power pack, which I'm not sure why you would do that in real life, but we can do that here just to power up the display and kind of test it out. Look, it's about to go off. So we got this thing set up and it's actually working pretty good. It was kind of fun playing with it a little bit to see how accurate it is. So now the water's going down, the water's going down. I would say this one is way more sensitive and way more accurate than either of the previous two. The nice thing is it's not only giving you the level in the tank, but it's also doing some math based on the dimensions of the tank that we gave it and determining the amount of gallons that are actually in the tank. So the gallons are changing, but this reading here, ironically, is not changing. And it's also not really changing on the tank monitor. Well, you can actually see on the tank monitor itself, it's actually showing a full tank also. Let's see. Oh yeah, so that's going down as we go up. There we go. So it's definitely bigger jumps, and I think that's because it's measuring, let's see, there's about 10 bars, and I think we set our tank height to 4 feet. So every 10 inches or so would be a bar, so you have to go about 20 inches, so pretty far. So this is currently in like pairing mode, or not pairing mode, but it's in learning mode, and this system, apparently you want to be darn good and ready to put the sensor on your tank, because it gives basically constant readings for the first 10 minutes. And then it goes into a different mode where it sends less frequent readings. And apparently if you don't get the sensor installed in time, it can have problems. So this display has quite a few other things built into it that are kind of nice. So it'll actually show you a percentage of the tank. Of course, it's giving a lot of readings right now, so I think the display is kind of freaking out a little bit. But it'll also show you the amount of inches. All it's saying is full. 97% We're at 45 inches, and that's the time. I believe that this display can actually show you a lot more information. I'm just thinking because the thing's kind of in learning mode and it's sitting on this table that we're having problems getting all the information, but maybe we can just talk about some of the features. Because this system is able to convert your tank capacity into liters or gallons, it has a bit more sophisticated setup step. And it involves basically figuring out the shape of your tank, which is why I mentioned earlier, if you don't know anything about your tank, this may not work very well for you. We ended up choosing a tank that fit the dimensions, and then we have to tell it the capacity of the tank, the width, and the height, and then that's how it uses math to figure out how many gallons are left. It needs about a week for it to determine your usage. We obviously don't have time to do that for this video, but with that feature, it's able to tell you your usage over time, each day, every 7, 30, and 365 days. And of course, you're able to set up an alarm so that if the level gets too high or too low, it'll give you an indication. So this system is definitely more visually useful. It gives you a lot more information, and it's more actionable. Instead of just how many inches of liquid are in your tank, it's able to do math and give you an idea in either gallons or liters. And the usage feature is really great if you're trying to track, like, how much water do we use in the winter versus the summer, or like in our case, how much does our water consumption increase when we start gardening season versus non-gardening months. Couple of last details. So this is definitely more sophisticated than either of the two we've reviewed so far or looked at, but it still cannot control a pump. It doesn't have any way to do any external controls, and it's not compatible with anything internet based. So you're not going to be able to check that stuff from the internet. But I would say for $20 more, this thing definitely has a lot more features. I did read about one thing on their website that said that you can add a cable to one of these sensors in case you do have a curved tank. So if you have a curved tank, you might do some research. There may be a way to make this more compatible with your tank system. Next up is a little bit more investment, but gaining some sophistication, although ironically with a more expensive system, we're gonna lose some features. This system is from Aquatel, and the price on this one is $349. And there's some really important but little features that differentiate it from the previous models. Let's take a look. With the additional cost, we're gaining a massive benefit. I would say that the pieces that we've unboxed so far are more on like the DIY kind of budget, rainwater harvesting, hobby category. I don't know what to say, but this product is a big jump, and that's really manifested in the range of the product. So we've been working in like the 500-foot range, and this product starts at 1,000 feet, and with some additional antennas and such is extendable to 6 miles. Of course, it's line of sight, so you can't go around mountains and through your neighbors' buildings. But the range on this unit starts at 1,000 feet or 300 meters. This guy is the sensor for this system. And right away, it's really obvious that this thing is meant to be out in the weather, and it's meant to be durable. Everything about it, the quality of the plastic and kind of the thoughtfulness of the construction. It is a non-contact sensor, so this is another ultrasonic sensor, but there's something you'll notice right away, and that is that this sensor is able to tilt. That's really important because the tank or the sensors we've been looking at are not compatible with domed or round tanks. And this one is. It can actually be installed on an incline, and the sensor can be aimed down so that it's still able to achieve the perpendicular orientation to the liquid, but the sensor does not need to be mounted perfectly flat. Man, it seems like you're gonna break it. It's not part of our comparison here, but I'll just say that the weather seal on this thing is no joke. This thing is like hurricane proof. All right, so for batteries, there are 4 AA's at the sensor. You can see that there's no tank display or anything, so there's no way to monitor the tank if you're there. And of course, there's no way to charge the batteries in this unit. It's just once the batteries are dead, you're going to have to replace them. This system is designed to be expandable, and it allows up to 6 of these sensors per receiver. And the depth of the tank that it's compatible with is 1 to 4 meters, which is 1.3 to 13.1 feet. Something unique about this system is this kind of exposed antenna, which no doubt is how they're getting such an extended range. It is a little bit of a vulnerability for moisture though with the system. They do make it very clear in the manual that it does need to be mounted so that the water will not penetrate the sensor, but you can see that that's going to get you probably quite a bit more range. The other products, the antennas are less conspicuous, and that probably explains why they're less range also. So the display unit for this is only going to show you the depth of the tank. There's no conversion to gallons or liters. And it looks to me like, well, I think it is showing a temperature of the tank. So there's actually a temperature where the display is located, and there's actually a tank temperature. From what I can tell, there's no history on this display. It's not able to track water consumption over time, but it does have a high and a low alarm, and it has a leak detection feature. You may have to set that up, but it's going to keep an eye out for a rapid drop in water volume. Overall, this display, it looks to me to be very primitive, but it also looks to be very durable. It's powered by an external power source, 6 volt, but there actually is a place to put a couple of AA batteries, so if the power goes out, you don't lose all of your settings. It does say in their instructions that they offer a battery pack for this. I'm guessing it's some sort of 2 AA battery pack. It does have, again, another pretty pronounced or conspicuous antenna, and I'm thinking there's the range increase from the other models. You can tell kind of by the design, but this company is definitely far more advanced. This system is capable of an internet connection, not what we're looking at here. There's additional products that you would need to purchase. Additionally, you can control pumps and other things with a companion to this system where the units talk to a relay or some sort of control. So this system is very much an expandable and kind of feature optional type setup. There's definitely some pros to this system I can see being worth investing in. I think the con, if there is one, is that the display is just, it's super basic. It's going to say, yep, there's stuff in the tank, or nope, it's not. And it gives you a temperature reading. And if that's what you're looking for, and you need to do it over a long range, this is a pretty good system for that. It also can be expanded, so keep that in mind. And there's lots of other features like the pump and the internet and all that stuff that can be added to make this system more feature rich. This one, you're probably gonna have to take out a small mortgage. We're getting up there in price, guys. This one is $499, and that's just for the basic system. So with the added expense, we get another jump in range. And now we're getting into some serious numbers. So out of the box, this thing is rated at 2.5 miles line of sight, or 4 kilometers. And it can be upgraded to 6 miles or 10 kilometers of range. The Aquatel system had this kind of smaller but more conspicuous antenna than the other kind of lower cost items, and you can see the huge change in the conspicuous antenna with this system. We'll get to this later in the displays, but there are also external antennas on most of the displays for this system, but not all of them. However, there is one major difference between this and everything else we've already looked at. This is a contact sensor. This actually isn't even a sensor at all. The sensor is this cable which gets lowered into the liquid and measures the specific gravity, or measures the weight of something based on its specific gravity. It's a very high precision stainless steel sensor, and this allows the system to be extremely precise, and it also makes it way more versatile as far as the mounting location. So the shape of the tank really isn't that big of an issue. All that matters is that this sensor be gently lowered to the bottom, and it knows the specific gravity, and therefore it can figure out how much liquid is in the tank. This is one of those reasons that I didn't jump on this right away when we were looking for something, because I found a lot of these systems used a physical sensor, and the thought of putting something physical, no matter how clean, in our drinking water didn't sit well with me. But I can understand the wisdom of it, and I'm excited to try this out and compare it to these ultrasonic sensors, which have benefits, but they also have obvious drawbacks. The system is powered by a sealed battery. It's completely self-contained, and I'm kind of confused because it was my understanding that this was a solar panel. You know what? Now that I turn it to the side, I can actually see it. That actually is a solar panel on top. So this unit with a reasonable amount of sun will actually keep the battery topped off, which is good because I don't really see how you're going to replace the battery. This is a pretty sealed up transmitter. So with good sun, I think you're going to be good to go, which means pretty much zero maintenance on the transmitter side. This system is probably the most weatherproof system because it's completely sealed. This sensor actually has a weatherproof connector which attaches on the bottom here. And this entire display and everything down here, which is comprised of one button, is completely sealed up. This system is expandable to 9 tanks total, which is the largest number of any of the systems that we've looked at. You can tell that there's no display of the water status at the tank. I mean, this is just basically a hunk of plastic. You're going to have to look at the display to get your water status or liquid status. Out of the box, this thing has a 13-foot cable, and that doesn't lock you into a particular tank size. It can be anything up to 13 feet. Because the sensor lays at the bottom of the tank, any tank depth under 13 feet will work. But they do have cables up to 30 feet in length that you would have to buy as an accessory. This little guy is the display, and this one, unlike all the others, is actually a touch screen. They have 3 displays, a desk mount, an industrial desk mount, and this wall mount. So this thing is designed to actually fit over an outlet box, and they include this little tiny transformer that you actually attach to your electrical in your house, hide this little transformer, and this is all that you would actually see on the surface. So as far as aesthetics, this is fantastic. And the screen, if we can get it powered up, I think is gonna look just as good. So we just happen to have some power that's sitting here waiting to be finished for a light. And I think we should be able to wire this display into this to get it to work, at least to figure it out. This will be a good test. Well, I'll be doggone. 5 gallons of water is going to last us 200 days. So the display on this one is it's great. Like, that was fast. I mean, it paired quickly. And this one will show you a lot of history, but again, it doesn't show you gallons or liters. It only shows you the capacity. And the nice thing about this system is it's not such a speculative system like the ultrasonics are. When you set the height of the tank, it actually determines for itself what the maximum water level is when you actually fill the tank to the maximum height. So it's pretty smart. It doesn't take your word for it. It actually comes to that conclusion on its own. Therefore, it's like self-calibrating. Also, it does, over time, pay attention to water consumption, and it uses the lowest level and the highest level in the tank to determine how many days of water you have left. That's not a great calculation, because what if you have a high water usage day? Like maybe you start watering the garden some days but not other days. I guess in some ways having a gallons or liters calculation is practical. That way you can make your own conclusion about how many days you have left. It does have a signal strength indicator in the corner of the display, which is nice, I guess, if you're trying to, having challenges getting the 2 units to talk to each other. The display is obviously powered by wall power or grid power, so if you lose power, this unit's going to turn off, and I don't see any kind of battery backup for this display. The good news is there's not really any configuration stored in the display. Everything is provided by the sensor. It does store 30 days of water usage, and it does it kind of in a bar graph. So it doesn't give you like actual gallons used or anything, but it can kind of give you an idea of the trends so you can see those. It does have a leak detection feature where it can notice like an abnormal usage level, and it's going to give you an alarm. It does actually have a high and a low alarm also, which are all programmable. It is internet capable, not out of the box. There are additional pieces that have to be added to make the system talk to your phone or talk to a computer, but at least you can get the information through the internet. Well, you can kind of understand why I felt so confused when I was shopping for sensors. We have everything here from a $62 to a $500 sensor, 300 feet to 6 miles of range, and everything in between. I don't know that I really have a strong inclination about which one of these I'm really in love with, because each one of them seems to have features that I wish other ones had. I guess it'll really come down to testing and putting them in tanks and kind of living with them for a little bit, trying them out. First of all, can we even get the range that's advertised on some of these things? I think that's a real problem. Our cisterns are quite a ways away, and it's not exactly line of sight. I'm not sure who has, maybe in the Midwest or something. So our plan is to start testing these things very soon. It's gonna be interesting for sure. You're gonna wanna stick around for that video.